بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وما تقدموا لأنفسكم من خير تجدوه عند الله إن الله بما تعملون بصير.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. أما بعد، فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: إن الصلاة عمود الدين. Adhan and Iqama are the recommended parts of the obligatory prayers. It is recommended to offer or to recite the Iqama and the Adhan before the obligatory prayers, and not before every obligatory prayer, because we have certain obligatory prayers like the prayer which is offered on a dead body and the prayer which is offered as a result of an earthquake, or the Eid prayers. There is no Adhan and Iqama for these obligatory prayers. Only the daily obligatory prayers require Adhan and Iqama. And of course, Adhan, if you are going to combine the prayers, for example, the midday and afternoon prayers, it is not recommended to offer or to recite the Adhan. The same is true with the Maghrib and Isha prayers. It's not necessary to recite the Adhan if you are going to combine the Maghrib and Isha prayers. Of course, there is no need to tell you how to recite the Adhan and Iqama, because you hear it from the TV screens and from your local mosque every day. Almost every day you hear the Adhan being said, the Iqama being said, and I don't feel the need to recite or to tell you how to recite the Adhan and Iqama. One thing that has to be kept in mind in connection with the Adhan as well as Iqama is that the third testimony, or which is called Shahadat al-Salisa in the subcontinent, of course, this third testimony is not a part of either Adhan and Iqama. No one from religious scholars, no one from the prominent religious authorities have ever said that it is a part of either the Adhan or Iqama. Of course, it is recommended to recite the third testimony in Adhan and Iqama, but of course with the intention of seeking proximity and with the intention of raja, or and the hope of getting sawab. Of course, one should not have it in his mind that it is a certain observation, certain thing that need to be observed. Of course, when you enter a mosque and you find that a congregational prayer is being held and the Adhan and Iqama have already been said, then it is not recommended to recite the Adhan as well as Iqama. You have to remember, many people recite the Adhan on their own while they are in a mosque and the adhan has been said, the iqamah has been said. No, it is not recommended to recite it. Also, if you hear someone reciting the adhan and iqamah, you are sitting beside him and you are not offering your prayers, but you do intend to offer your prayers, and you are sitting or standing behind or near someone who is reciting the adhan and iqamah, and you hear him, although you may not be reciting with him, along with him, you may not be repeating the adhan and iqamah with him, but you hear him, then in this case, if you are going to offer your prayers, it's not recommended, it is not mustahab to recite the adhan and iqamah. Dear brothers and sisters, if you are going to recite the adhan and iqamah before offering your prayers, it has been said by religious authorities, by the grand religious authorities, by mujtahideen and ulama, that after you have recited the adhan, it is recommended that you walk one step forward, or it is recommended to sit down. It is recommended to wait if you are not going to walk one step forward. It is recommended to wait, and there should be a gap between adhan and iqamah. If you are not going to wait, then you can talk so as to create a gap between adhan and iqamah. This is recommended. You can sit down if you would like to. You can sit down after reciting the adhan, and then you can start offering or reciting iqamah. That is recommended. And it's also recommended that when the adhan is being said, it is recommended that you repeat the adhan along with the person who recites. Though you might hear it from a loudspeaker, but it is recommended that wherever you are and whatever you are doing during the adhan, it's recommended that you repeat the words and the sentences of adhan. It is, of course, mustahab. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm going to explain some other rules in regard with prayers. A question is there: what are the obligatory acts for prayer? Of course, all the recitals, all the takbir, and all the parts which are offered and which are done during the prayers are not entirely obligatory. Some are recommended, some are wajib, and some are the basic elements, and some are not the basic elements of the prayer. Now we have to distinguish as to which ones or which acts are obligatory and which acts are basic, and of course elemental, and which are not elemental, because there is a difference between the obligatory acts and between the elementals or the basic elements of prayers. The basic elements of the prayers are the most important elements and the most important parts of every prayer. Now, before explaining the rules and before elaborating and expounding the basic elements, I would like to draw your attention to 11 obligatory acts for prayer. Now, those 11 obligatory acts are, first of all, the niyat. As you know very well, no religious act, no deed is done without a niyyah. And no prayer is accepted, no prayer is valid without a proper niyyah, a proper intention. And of course, every prayer should be offered with the niyyah, with the intention of complying God's order, with the niyyah of obeying and seeking nearness to God. prayer is offered with the intention of showing off to the public or showing off to your friends or trying to show or to demonstrate to other people that you are a person of prayer or a person who offers his prayers, then this kind of action, which is done with the intention of showing yourself to other people, is obviously invalid. The prayer is not valid. You have to offer prayers again. And any religious act, whether it is prayer, whether it is fasting, whether it is Hajj or any other obligatory acts, should be done with the pure intention of compliance, with the intention of seeking nearness and proximity to Allah the Almighty. Now, the next obligatory act is, of course, Qiyam. There are 11 obligatory acts for the prayers. The next is Qiyam. Qiyam, of course, means standing. Standing erect, standing up. Some people might be standing, but they might still look like they are bending. No. You must stand straight up. You must stand erect while saying the Takbiratul Ihram and while making your intention, while forming your niyat. Of course, niyat is a matter of the heart. Even if you might be sitting, still you can have the niyat of offering prayers. But while saying Takbiratul Ihram, it is necessary that you must be standing, because if you are offering your prayers and if you recite Takbiratul Ihram and you are in a sitting posture or you are in a bending posture, then the prayer would be invalid. And the other obligatory act of prayer is Takbiratul Ihram. Of course, Takbiratul Ihram is a basic element as well, but it is the most important part of the prayer, because with the Takbiratul Ihram you start offering your prayers. And of course, when you say Takbiratul Ihram, you initiate your prayers and you start considering yourself in the state of prayer. You cannot thereafter, after you have said Takbiratul Ihram, you cannot break it, you cannot move. And of course, it is very much necessary to take into consideration that while reciting Takbiratul Ihram, it is necessary, it is essential that your body should be motionless. Your body should be steady. Steadiness is very important. Whether you are reciting a zikr, whether you are offering your prayers, and whenever you are reciting something during the prayers, it is necessary, it is very much essential that your body should be motionless. You cannot move and recite something. Unfortunately, we see many young people and many people who are even aged people, they have either no knowledge about the importance of being motionless during prayers, or they have knowledge and they know that it is necessary for your body to be steady during the prayers, but they still don't care about it, and that is very important, very, very important. Something which is very important and which has a very effective role in the way you offer your prayers and the very appearance of your prayers. How can you offer your prayer when you are moving, or when you are moving your legs and your limbs and your head? Some people I have seen, they just turn their neck left and right, or they just move their hands violently. They even change their position while reciting a zikr. That is absolutely not permissible. If you recite a zikr, whether it is Takbiratul Ihram or whether it is Hamd or it's Surah or while reciting the zikr of ruku or reciting the zikr of sujood, as well as tashahhud and any other parts of the prayers, except for those recommended zikr, it is not permissible to move your position, to move your legs while reciting a zikr. You must be motionless. You must keep remaining steady and motionless while reciting a zikr. Never move violently, otherwise your prayer will be affected. Otherwise you will, by so doing, you will make your prayers void. So, when you are reciting the zikr of ruku or the zikr of sujood, do not move. Keep motionless and remain steady when you recite the zikr. That is very important. I have noticed many people moving while doing ruku, moving while doing sujood. That will invalidate your prayers. Look at how the ulama and the great scholars are offering their prayers. Of course, you have access to TV channels, and you see people, the great scholars, how do they offer their prayers? Look at them, learn how they offer their prayers. They never move when reciting a zikr. They never move their hands when offering their prayers. Of course, moving your fingers, moving a little bit, moving your hand, but not violently, will not affect your prayers. But if you move in such a way that you are considered to be not caring about the prayers, or you are considered to be like walking or doing some other action, then that is, ruku is also a basic element, and it is the fourth, of course, the fourth obligatory act of prayer. And the fifth one is that two sajdas, the sajdatain, or the two prostrations, that is also important and one of the basic elements of the prayer. And the sixth one is qira'ah, or recitation of Surah Hamd and also other surahs. Qira'at is also important, but it's not a basic element. It's not elemental. If you forget or if you leave out the qira'at by mistake, your prayer will not be affected. And that is the difference between, of course, a basic element and a non-basic element, a non-elemental wajib act. The seventh obligatory act is zikr. Of course, zikr prescribed means the recitation which has been prescribed in ruku, in sujood. That is zikr, and zikr is also important, but it is not a basic element. What is considered to be the basic element in ruku and sujood is the ruku itself, the bending, and also the two sajdas, not one sajda. Both of the two sajdas are considered to be the basic element. And the eighth obligatory part of the prayer is the tashahhud. Of course, tashahhud is an important part of the prayer. And of course, we have the zikr in tashahhud, we have the shahadatain, and also some Muslims have recently started offering the third shahada, the third testimony in the tashahhud, which is not allowed by many scholars. The current scholars whose risala I have studied, they say that you must not recite the third testimony in tashahhud, or the shahadat salisa in tashahhud. Unfortunately, many of my Indian and Pakistani co-religionists emphasize on reciting the third testimony, while it's not good to do so, because the prayer has its own form and its own template. You cannot add something to the prayer from yourself. You cannot omit something from the prayer from yourself. Of course, the third testimony is good by itself. It is recommended to recite the third testimony elsewhere, because our belief in the successorship of the commander of faithful, Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, is an important part of our faith. It is an essential part of our belief and of our religious doctrine. But every religious doctrine, every good thing cannot be added to the prayer. You cannot add to the prayer what you believe to be good. Now the third testimony, the belief in the successorship and in the wilayah and the guardianship of the commander of faithful is an important and essential part of our faith. But the religious scholars have said and have emphasized that you should offer your prayers and the tashahhud in the same way that we have explained and elaborated in the Risala and in the manuals of Islamic laws. Now look at the Risala of Imam Khomeini, Ayatollah Khoi, and Ayatollah Gul Paigani, Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Riza Gul Paigani, and also the living scholars, the living mujtahideen nowadays. None of them have ever said that you can recite the third testimony in tashahhud. None of them have ever emphasized on reciting. Only there are, of course, some exceptions, some few unknown scholars who have said that reciting the third testimony is allowed with the intention of qurbat. But that is I have always said, and as the ulama and the great religious authorities have said, that you, as a duty bound, as a mukallaf, you should follow the most learned mujtahid, the most qualified scholar, the most eligible scholar. You cannot look for someone who allows you to recite the third testimony. You cannot search for books. You cannot go through the books to find if any previous scholars have ever allowed the recitation of the third testimony in tashahhud. Of course, some scholars might have said this, but they are not your mujtahid. You cannot deduce and infer from the Islamic law whatever you want. It is not your duty to deduce, because you don't have the capacity, you don't have the eligibility and the requirements to infer and to deduce or to discover Islamic laws from the religious sources, from the Quran and from the Sharia, from the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. It is the duty of the competent scholars and jurists to infer such laws and such instructions and injunctions from the Islamic laws. You, duty bound, has to submit yourself to the injunctions and to the fatwa of the great scholars. Do not create or legislate anything on your own behalf or from your own self. It is easier to surrender yourself to the command and to the fatwa, to the verdicts and rulings of the scholars, than to go through the books and to find for yourself what the imams and what the infallibles have said. You do not have the capacity to understand the sayings of the infallible imams. Even if there is a saying from the infallible imams, but it is not the only saying, there are other sayings, and they have to be studied as a whole in order to come to a conclusion regarding a ruling. And this is the duty I should emphasize and say it again and stress, that it is not the duty of you as a duty bound, as a mukallaf, to infer, to deduce the Islamic laws from the Sharia sources. And it is only, unfortunately, this dispute of the third testimony exists only in the subcontinent. Only the people coming from the subcontinent have a dispute. Otherwise, Shias elsewhere, the Shiites living in other countries in the Middle East, in Iran, Iraq, and those who come from other countries and they are Shia, they have never entertained any doubt about the verdicts and the edicts of the grand religious authorities. They have never recited the third testimony in their prayers. Now, why not you? Why not you follow the ulama, the scholars? Do not label anyone as being anti-wilaya or anti, shahadat al-salisa if you are not a mujtahid, if you are not a person of such qualification. Dear brothers and sisters, because I explain this rule because this is one of the most frequently asked questions, and this question is directed to the offices of the grand religious authorities. Many questions are daily received by the scholars. I have been to the offices of some grand religious authorities. I have seen their websites, and I know how many questions are daily received regarding the third testimony. So that's why I had to emphasize this. That's why I had to explain the ruling regarding the tashahhud and regarding the third testimony. As far as the next important segment and the next important part, obligatory part of the prayer is concerned, it is salam, of course. The prayer should end with salam. There should be salutation at the end of the prayer. It is an important part of the prayer. It is an essential part of the prayer. It is obligatory, but it's not a basic element. And the 10th, of course, obligatory part or act of the prayer is the tartib, the sequence. All acts of the prayer should be offered in a sequential order. They should come one after another. You cannot offer the surah before hamd or the sujood before the ruku. No. Every act of the prayer has its own proper position and its own place, and they should be offered and they should be done and performed in their own respective places. That is the meaning of tartib. Now the tasbihat arba'a cannot be recited in the first and second rak'at, and the second rak'at. And of course the recitals, the zikr of the prayers have their own places, have their own respective positions, and they cannot be changed, they cannot be replaced. You cannot offer the zikr of sujood and during ruku, or that of ruku during sujood. Of course, they have to be recited in their own respective places. And the last obligatory part or act of the prayer is the mu'alat. Mu'alat is an important part of the prayer. Mu'alat, what does mu'alat mean? Mu'alat means that you have to perform the different acts of the prayers in regular succession. They have to be performed successively. There should not be any gap between the acts of the prayers. You cannot create an interval or a pause between the acts of the prayers. Of course, you can pause a little bit while reciting the zikr or while doing, but there should not be a huge gap between the acts of the prayers. They have to be offered and performed in proper succession. And there should not be a great interval between the acts. Otherwise, the interval would break the shape of the prayer, and you will not be considered as offering a prayer if you keep the gap. Now, brothers and sisters, I have to explain one more thing and that is these 11 acts of the obligatory acts of prayer, some of them are considered to be the basic elements and some of them are not considered elemental. Some of them are not the basic elements of the prayer. What does a basic element mean? A basic element of the prayer means that if you forget them or if you leave out a basic element and you do not offer it, you do not perform it intentionally or by mistake, then your prayers will be void. For example, if you do not perform ruku intentionally or by mistake, it does not make any difference, then your prayers will be made void. You have to offer your prayers once again. And if you do not perform the 2 sajdas, not one sajda, because one sajda is not considered rukn, it's not considered a basic element, but a combination of the 2 prostrations is considered to be the basic element. So if you forget, or if you do not perform or recite the 2 sajdas, or perform the 2 sajdas intentionally, then your prayers will be made void. The same is true if you add a ruku, or if you add sajda to your prayers, then your prayers will be made void. If you omit it by mistake or intentionally, or if you add a rukun, a basic element to your prayers intentionally or forgetfully or by mistake, then your prayers will be made void. But if an obligatory obligatory act of prayer is not considered to be a basic element, and you forget it, or you do it by mistake, add it by mistake, something by mistake, not intentionally, then your prayers will not be made void. But if you do it intentionally, for example, you recite hamd and you recite something additionally intentionally, or you recite something, add something to the prayer intentionally, then your prayer will be made void. But if you do not do it intentionally, and if it is done by mistake or forgetfully, then your prayers will remain intact and it will not be affected. These are some of the rules regarding the obligatory acts of prayer. Inshallah, I will carry on, and the next session, the same discussion, but the topic will be different. It will be about the prayer, but the discussion will be regarding the prayer, but it will be on a different parts of the prayer. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا
يا ربنا
واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا ربنا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا ربنا يا ربنا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا ربنا ربنا يا ربنا يا ربنا
يا ربنا